Good morning, everyone. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and I hope you're well. Today is Friday. It's August 28th, and we're getting ready for Shabbos Parshas Ki Setze. And I wanted to share a Dvar Torah with you this morning. There's a pasuk in the Parsha that at first glance just completely may pass us by. But when we look at it and we see what the Mefarshim have to say about it, it truly is eye-opening. It's in Perek Chav Beis, that's chapter 22 in Devarim, and it's pasuk Yud, verse 10. The pasuk states, "Lo sacharosh b'shor v'chamor yachdav," that when we're plowing, we're working our fields, we shouldn't harness our plow up to both a donkey and an ox. We should not use these two different species to pull the same plow. So Rashi is quoting the Sifri. He's also quoting the Mishnah and Kalayim. Rashi says as follows: this really isn't limited to just an ox and a donkey. It says, "Hu adin l'chol shnei minim sheba'olam." This would be any two species. They could be, one could be kosher, one could be non-kosher. They could both be kosher, but just be different. A shore, an ox, and a sheep, that's something you don't want to harness together. It could be two non-kosher animals. You can have a zebra and a donkey. We're not supposed to harness two animals that are not from the same family. We should not be putting them together to pull a plow. The Rashi continues quoting the Medrash and the Mishnah again, saying, and it's not limited to plowing. Let's say I have them pulling my carriage or something of that nature. That's also a problem. So the question that some of our Mefarshim deal with is as follows. I understand that this Torah's prohibition applies to all animals. It's not limited to a donkey and an ox. I understand that, and I'll take that. But however, if the Torah chose to teach me this limud, to teach me this instructive advice, using a shor and a chamor, there must be a message there. Why did the Torah choose to tell me this idea of lo sachrosh, that I'm not supposed to harness these two separate animals together? Why choose a shor and a chamor? Just say you can't harness any two animals that aren't exactly the same, aren't from the same family together. Why did it choose the shor and chamor? So I want to share with you two ideas from the Chizkuni. One of our classic Rishonim, the Chizkuni, he writes two short ideas. First idea, he says, Shor malagera tamid. The shor, the ox, is constantly chewing its cud. It's just the way it is. It always looks like it's chewing on something. V'ochel, and as a result of that, it seems as if it's always eating because it regurgitates its food to digest it again, and it's chewing it to swallow it once more. V'chamor eno malagera, and the chamor, the donkey, is not an animal that chews its cud. Remember, there's the two signs of a kosher animal. It has to have split hooves and it has to chew its cud. The donkey does not chew its cud, but the shor, the ox, does. So there's a real difference between them. So what's that teaching us? Nimsa. So it would come out if I would harness a donkey and an ox together, shezeh ochel v'zeh misaneh, is that the donkey's going to look at the ox and it looks like he's always eating. And he's having a great time. He's always chewing on something. He's always eating. And the donkey's not. He's almost being afflicted because it's torture for him to watch this his mate, this ox, constantly eating at an animal. They don't have much in the way of seichel. That's what they do. They want to eat. That's what they want. They want to chew and they want to eat. So the donkey's going to feel a sense of torture to see that his chaver, this mate that he's harnessed to the plow with, is constantly chewing. Looks like he's always eating. And the donkey hasn't been given a meal in a while. It's going to be torture for him. And that is causing pain to an animal. And the Torah does not want us. God doesn't want us to cause pain to an animal. That's emotional pain. That's not physical pain. That's emotional pain. I'm not allowed to cause emotional pain to this animal. So the Torah is teaching us. It chose to wrote lo sachros shor v'chamor yachtov. Why did it choose to tell me about a shor and chamor? To drive home this point of how sensitive we have to be to animals. The Chizkuni gives us a second shot, a second explanation. He says, Davar acher, rachamov shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu al kol ma'asav. We say every day in our davening, rachamov al kol ma'asav. God has mercy. He has feelings of compassion for all of his creations, including animals. Ben koach hachamor ke koach hashor. It wouldn't be fair to harness them together because the strength of a donkey, while a donkey might be strong, is nowhere near as strong as an ox. So here it is that they'd be working together, and it's not an even load. It's not an even workload. The ox is working much harder than the donkey. The donkey's struggling to keep up. He's got to keep at a faster clip, a faster pace. It's not fair to the donkey. So you want to take two animals that are in the same ballpark and put them together. But to take an animal that one's such a gibor and one's not, one's so strong, one's not, it's just not fair. And again, that's teaching us the concern that the Torah has to animals. What do we do with this? Once we see, once we see that the Torah has this very real concern about Tsar Baalei Chaim, what do we do with this? Unfortunately, all of us could think of incidents in our lives where we've seen this very real, it's a Torah value to have a concern for animals. We've seen it spin out of control. We've seen some animal rights activists that even though that's a noble cause, they don't know how to put a gather, they don't know how to put any type of border on this. It could get out of control. And the way they'll treat an animal, it's mind-boggling sometimes. How the cover, the respect, and how they'll put that animal first before a human being. It's just, it can spin out of control. And I want to share with you, I remember when I was in yeshiva, this was years ago, and I actually found the news article this morning. It was in 1994. So I remember this was shortly after I graduated high school in 92. And I remembered when this happened, it made such an impression on me. So I found the article. It was first reported in the New York Times. And the article was as follows. I'll just read you a few paragraphs. Cub draws more donations than dead women's children. This was May 27, 1994, and it was written out of San Francisco. Soon after a 40-year-old woman was killed by a mountain lion in the Sierra Nevada foothills last month, friends set up a trust fund for her children, ages 5 and 8. And when the state authorities tracked and killed the mountain lion a week later, a regional zoo began to collect money for her 7-week-old cub. So we have these competing funds. People are raising money for the children of this jogger who was killed by this mountain lion. And then someone's raising money, a zoo's raising money for the cubs of this mountain lion that had to be put down because it had killed the jogger. And when the state authorities tracked, I'm sorry, I just read that. At the end of last week, when it was reported that the cub had received $21,000, while the Children's Trust Fund had only received $9,000, many residents of Placerville, near the site of the killing, expressed shock. It's hard for us to hear about how the lion cub is getting more money, said Jill Baker, a spokeswoman for the Placerville U.S. Bank of California, where the Children's Trust Fund had been set up. We look at the kids, and they don't even know what's happened to them, and we say, good heavens. And the story goes on a little bit. But here's something that, again, it's spun out of control. There's a very real idea. We need to prevent Tsar Baalei Chaim. The Torah mandates us that we have to be sensitive to an animal suffering. But how do we keep this very real principle, this very real mandate from the Torah? How do we keep this from taking on a life of its own? And how do we keep it in perspective? So I want to share with you a very little-known medrash. It's quoted by the classic Musar work Orchos Tzadikim, and it's in this in the parak. It's in the chapter called Shar Hakina, the Gate of Envy. And he's talking about how envy could be such a disastrous character trait to have, but there are some ways that envy could be used in the service of God. And listen to this. He quotes an amazing medrash. He says, our sages of blessed memory taught, if Avram Avinu had not felt some envy, Lo haya koneh shemayim v'aretz. He never would have acquired the full share of heaven and earth that he did. The Avram's success in life came from a degree of healthy envy that he felt. When did he have that healthy envy? Kishamar l'Malki Tzedek. He met up with Malki Tzedek, who according to our sages was another name for Shem. Shem was one of the children of Noach who survived the Mabul, the flood, by being in the Teva, in the ark. So Abraham meets him. It's his great-grandfather. He meets him. And he asks him the following question. Ketzad yitzasam in a teva? How did you leave the teva? Meaning, what's the chusim? What merits did you and your family have? The whole world's being destroyed. The teva could have sank. What merits did you have that allowed you to survive? Amar lo. So Shem says, b'tzedakah osim sham. It was in the merit of all the tzedakah that we did in the teva, in the ark. Amar lo. So Avram says to him, v'chimat tzedakah haya lechem lasos b'teva. Well, how did you have an opportunity to do tzedakah? You were in the ark. Were there paupers? Were there anyone there knocking on your door saying that I've got these needs? The whole world's being destroyed. It's just your family in there. You've got all your needs. How did you do tzedakah? You just had your family. So who could you possibly have engaged in acts of charity with? Amar lo. So Shem says to Avram, in behemos chayos va'ofos, with all those animals and birds, everything that was in the teva. Lo hayinu yishanim, we never slept. Elo hayinu nosnim lifnei zeh lechov lishtos. We were constantly tending to those animals, putting out in front of them to eat and drink. Va'oso shah, because they all had different schedules, and they were constantly taking care of them. Va'oso shah amar Avram. So then Avram says, oh my gosh, he just had a wake-up call. Uma elu ilu leit tzedakah shasuim behema b'chayof. Look at this family of Noach. Had they not been engaged in acts of tzedakah with animals, lo hayu yotzim min hateva, they wouldn't have merited to leave the ark. V'kivan shasu tzedakah, but as soon as they did get involved in tzedakah with those animals, yatsu, they did merit to leave. Af ani aset tzedakah in bnei adam. I'm going to get involved with charity with human beings. Shem b'tsalmo shel Elokeinu, because human beings are created b'tsalem Elokim, in the image of God. Al achas kama v'kamas, how much more so? Look at the value of tzedakah, Avram said. Noach and his whole family, Shem's telling him, they only survived, they only merited leaving the ark, the teva, because of tzedakah. And who did they do tzedakah with? Was animals. So Avram says, okay, tzedakah is important. All they had an opportunity to do tzedakah with was animals. But now we're not in a teva. We're not in an ark. Who do I have an opportunity to do tzedakah with? With human beings. And humans are created b'tsalem Elokim, in the image of God. How much more valuable must that be in the eyes of God? Oso shah, at that moment, vayita eshel. That's when Avraham decided to plant his eshel, that it says in Bereshis, Roshei Tevos Achila Shtia Levaya, is that the eshel stands for, that's an acronym, that he set up basically an inn, a hostel, that could provide for travelers a place to get some food, to get some drink, and a place that they would be escorted on their way. Yarba Adam Kina. In this manner, this sense of kina, of envy, is good. Avram was envious of Shem, and he learned from him. It inspired Avram to get involved with tzedakah and have a life of tzedakah. Titen, we say about all the avos. We say about Yaakov, that Yaakov had his concept. We say Yitzchak had his concept. Avram was known for his chesed. Avram was all about chesed. But who inspired that chesed? That was Shem. And he made a kal v'chomer. He made a logical deduction from the fact that Shem and his whole family have been so busy with chesed for animals. So look what Avram does. He recognizes that how important it is to treat animals right. That's true. But where I have the options between human beings and people, I want to run to share as much kindness as I can with humans first. Why? Because humans are created b'tsalem Elokim, in the image of God. And while it's true that Hashem has rachamav al kol ma'asav, that God has mercy and he has feelings of compassion for all of his creations, which includes animals, and all of us have an obligation to be compassionate to animals and not to cause them any pain. If we're in a position where we have to choose which is more important, to shower chesed and to use my limited resources for providing chesed with human beings or animals, so this reminds us that human beings come first. So I think this is a very important concept. That Setze, Parshas Setze, we're going to read this Shabbos, reminds us by Lo Sachro Shor V'Chamor Yachtav, that we don't plow using an axe and a donkey. That tells us how important the concept of preventing Tsar Baalei Chaim, not to cause damage to animals, and pain. But what do we do with that? We say to ourselves, I'm not going to cause pain to animals. But now that I see how concerned the Torah is about causing unnecessary pain to animals, even if it's emotional, like the first answer is cheskuni, it's emotional pain. If that's how the Torah tells me to care for animals, I now have to make a logical deduction and say, if that's how concerned I am for animals, how much more concerned do I have to be for my fellow human beings, for my family, for my friends, my community, for everyone around, my spouse, especially now in this month of Elul, where we're looking to repair our relationships, our relationship with God, ben Adam u'Makom, and also our interpersonal relationships, ben Adam u'Chavero. Let's use this idea of reminding us of how important it is not to cause pain to animals, to remind us how much more important it is not to cause any distress to our fellow human beings. And let's take this month to improve and see what can we do to enhance all of our interpersonal relationships. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.